Is butter a carb?
Hello everybody and welcome to my channel today. We are going to be covering the third section on dairy, in part to celebrate Dairy Month, which is June, and also to cover the dairy modules for Culinary Bootcamp. If you haven't checked out a lot of the Culinary Bootcamp content, please take a look in the description for links to all sorts of stuff, or just take a look on my channel. Today's video, we're going to be covering butter, concentrated milks, and dairy alternatives. So let's get started. Butter. Who doesn't love butter? I certainly love butter. But how is butter made? It turns out very simply. Butter is made from churning or agitating cream, which comes from milk. Butter must be made of at least 80% milk fat and not more than 16% water. And 2 to 4% of it has to be milk solids in order to be butter. All butters are not created equal. They are subject to mandatory grading through the USDA. Those three classifications of butter include AA, A, and B. AA butter is the highest quality that has the best texture and the best flavor. Grade A butter is a moderate, medium quality butter. It's okay tasting. It's got an okay texture. Grade B is for manufacturing and cooking only and is generally considered a very low quality eating butter. Among the grades are 4 different types of butter. The first type of butter is a salted butter. And a salted butter has at least 2.5% of salt added to the mixture. When using salted butter in cooking and baking, always take into consideration the salt content of the butter when you are mixing, and then adjust the salt in the recipe accordingly. The second type of butter is my favorite type of butter, and it's European butter. And nowhere else do you see the difference in quality of butter than between a standard American butter and a European or high-end butter. One of the things that makes imported butters a little bit different than domestic butters in the United States is the quality of the animal's lifestyle. Butter generally picks up the flavor of the cream from the cow or animal that it came from. So if the cows or animals that are sourcing your cream are grass-fed, it's going to give the cream a much richer, deeper flavor. If the cows that you are getting your cream from are just on a grain diet in a stockyard or in a large facility that's just straight manufacturing and they don't care what they're feeding their animals, you're going to get a pale butter that's fairly flavorless. So if you love butter, if you really love butter like I do, spend a little extra and treat yourself and give a European high-end butter a chance. European butter has a higher milk fat content than regular butter, which gives it an excellent mouthfeel. And that fat content is between 82 and 86% compared to the 80% in standard North American butter. There is also little to no salt in most European butters. European butter is made from cultured cream and gives it a much more intense buttery flavor than with standard butters. As I said, European butter is my favorite type of butter. This brand is my favorite European brand of butter. It is very expensive if you get into the regular grocery store, but if you look at just the color difference between the two butters, I'm not sure if you can see this here. Perhaps I'll take it out onto, well, no, you can see that. Look at the difference between a European butter and a standard American butter. And so we're going to move on to the third butter, which is a whipped butter. And whipped butter is just butter that has had air added to it to get it a lighter, fluffier texture. It's also to increase its volume and its spreadability. However, it goes bad much faster than butter that is not whipped because of the air incorporated into the product. So that's important to know. Also important is to not use whipped butter in your baking or your cooking because the weight and volume of butter is not going to be the same as an unwhipped product. The next type of butter is clarified butter, and clarified butter is butter that has had the water and the milk solids removed, leaving behind only the fat. This is especially useful in cooking when you don't want the butter to burn. The milk solids of butter are what causes butter to burn in the pan. Clarified butter in Indian cooking is known as ghee, Ghee. It's especially useful if you're going to make a hollandaise sauce, because one of the parts of making hollandaise sauce is separating out the milk solids from the fat. In a future video, I will be teaching you how to clarify butter. The fifth type of butter is not butter at all. It is margarine. Margarine is not a dairy product. It contains no to very, very little amount of dairy. It is usually sold alongside butter. Margarine is also made of vegetable oils, and if you've seen some of my videos on oils in the past, you'll know that vegetable oil is not ideal. And so I'm not a big proponent of using margarine. It does have its place in some recipes, but again, because margarine is not a dairy product and contains a high amount of water and vegetable oil, it is not appropriate to substitute out in many, if not all, baking recipes, unless the baking recipe calls for margarine, and I do have a couple recipes like that. So I do have a stick of margarine somewhere in my fridge from Christmas time. In addition to being made of water and vegetable oils, margarine is also made of flavor additives, emulsifications, colorings, preservatives, and it is made through a process called hydrogenation. The fat content, which comes from vegetable oils, mostly is 80% vegetable oils and 16% water. And as I stated before, please be careful if you are substituting margarine in other recipes. It is not a dairy product. One important part of keeping butter as long as possible is storage. Now, I tend to leave my butter on the counter for quite a long time. In the summer, it's not ideal, but it will last a little longer on the counter than what the guidelines suggest. So for butter, you want to keep it well wrapped in a cool location at a temperature between 32 and 35 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 and 2 degrees Celsius. Unsalted butter can be frozen for pretty long periods of time of up to 9 months, so that's a great way if you can get a good sale on unsalted butter, is to wrap it tightly and put it in your freezer. Salted butter is less prone to going bad than unsalted butter because of the salt content, salt being a preservative. It is suggested that you should not leave your butter out on the counter for a couple of days, especially if the interior temperatures are 70 or higher. Too much higher than that and you'll end up with a melted pool of butter. If you question how long your butter has been out or if you should keep your butter out for longer periods of time, as the saying goes, when in doubt, don't leave it out. There are 3 key ways that you can soften your butter. One is to take your butter out of the refrigerator between 30 minutes and an hour before it is needed. The second way to quickly thaw your butter is to cut it into 1/8 inch slices or grate it, and that will speed up how quickly it softens. The third way to soften your butter is to use the microwave and set it on the defrost at 30% power and heat it for 5-second intervals until it is softened. This method is not recommended for baking. The next topic is concentrated milks, and there are 3 types of concentrated milks, and they all have really good storage potential. The first type of concentrated milk is a powdered milk, and it comes in 3 types, and that is powdered whole milk, powdered non-fat milk, and powdered buttermilk. Powdered milk products have had all of their moisture removed, and so that all is left is the dehydrated portion of that product. Powdered milk can be used the same way as its fresh counterparts by just rehydrating with water. Powdered milks have a very long storage shelf life as long as they are stored in a tight container in a cool, dark place. The second type of concentrated milk is evaporated milk, and evaporated milk has had 60% of its moisture removed. It is also canned and sterilized in order to prolong its shelf stability. Evaporated milk can be used the same as its fresh counterpart by simply reconstituting the product with equal parts of water. The third type of concentrated milk is sweetened condensed milk. Sweetened condensed milk has also had 60% of its moisture removed, but it has had 40 to 45% of sugar added to it. The sugar, in addition to adding the sweet flavor, also imparts some preservative qualities. Sweetened condensed milk has a very delicate caramel flavor to it and cannot be a substitute for any other milk products. Sweetened condensed milk can be recreated using the following recipe. 2 cups of dry milk powder to 1 cup of sugar to a half a cup of hot water. There are some specific storage recommendations for condensed milk, and they are as follows. If your concentrated milk product is a liquid milk product, it can be stored in a cool, dry place for up to 6 months. Once that product is opened, it must be refrigerated and cared for in the same way any other milk product is stored or taken care of. Now, that 6 months is a general guideline. I have had times in my life where I've had some concentrated milk products around for years and then went ahead and tried them. I do recommend that once you open them, you just give them a smell test and you just make sure it looks normal. But 6 months is a very short period of time and they can store longer. Powdered concentrated milk products can be stored up to a year in a unopened container. Once that container is opened, it should be resealed promptly and continue to be stored in much the same way. Next, we're moving on to dairy alternatives. Dairy alternatives is a growing segment of the food industry. Dairy alternatives do not come from animal products, and that is what makes them particularly ideal to people who have lactose intolerance or who are on vegan or vegetarian diets or just don't want to consume dairy products for whatever personal reason they might choose. One of the important things to remember when you're selecting your dairy alternative is to take a look at those ingredients. You want to try to make sure that you avoid as much of the sweetened products as possible. Alternative dairy products are liquids that are made from seeds or grains that have been ground, soaked in water, and had the liquid removed. You can easily make dairy alternatives at home. The 2 main nut milks that can be substituted easily for your dairy products is almond milk and coconut milk, and these products can be substituted on a 1-to-1 basis. Other dairy alternatives that can be substituted on a 1-to-1 basis include rice milk and soy milk. And these 4 milks are pretty much the most popular on the market today, but there are other dairy alternatives, and they include hemp milk, cashew milk, flax milk, and oat milk. Please note that oat milk tends to be a bit on the starchy side compared to all the other alternatives and should be substituted at less than a 1-to-1 ratio. Well, that's it, you guys. That's it for butter, concentrated milk, and dairy alternatives. If you haven't checked out the other 2 dairy videos this month, take a look at those. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please consider doing so. I hope you found this information useful. If you liked what you saw, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment in the comment section below, and as always, have a wonderful day. Concentrated milks are great for long-term storage. So if I have any preppers out there who are watching, these are great alternatives to a fresh dairy product that you can store tightly and leave in a cool place for that big day.